I think that the least this writers' room could have done is watched My Cousin Vinny before they even started to put pen to paper.
My
Uh,
biological clock is ticking.
it's just they have no concept of what roles that they're doing. I mean, and the other part too is I would say in my experience on this planet, anyone that listens to club music recreationally and thinks that following the current trend right away, whether you're man or woman, is a smart idea, is a big red flag. And the last thing you want is for your main character to embody those types of red flags if you don't put her on a redemption arc, which they're not going to do because they're trying to they're doing a copy, I guess, of a sitcom formula. They think they know what it is because they've used to watch them years ago, but they never really paid attention to them.
No.
And you can tell from that. It's what you kind of unfortunately get, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the fan community, but with some fan films, they watch the stuff and they know it, but they're not really paying attention to the mechanics of what's going on in the properties that they love. So that's why you get a lot of fan films that tackle the same subject matter, have the same type of plot and drama beats, and but they don't actually have any real depth beyond what it is they're trying to emulate. And that's kind of what we're getting here is someone that's just copying what they think a sitcom is instead of really understanding what that is. And we're also getting the same part with the hour-long dramas, especially with Loki. They're copying what they think a serious fantasy drama is, but they don't understand what it's supposed to actually entail. And that also goes into Rings of Power. They're copying what they think Tolkien is, but they actually haven't studied enough to know what the author was intending to do with his stories and what themes he was actually exploring. Instead, they're just going on to the functional things. Well, it's about a bunch of rings, and one of them's more powerful than the other. So we'll tell the origin story about those rings and how they became more powerful than the other. It's like that's not the story of Lord of the Rings. But.
Yeah, the twerking thing, I used to do 3D modeling. No, I don't mean like this.
I was going to say you twerked yourself.
But I know, and I can see the inverse kinematics falling apart on that very cheap body model. Like the bum was sticking out way too far. So, I mean, these are the things I notice. And it would be horrible to just be the 3D animator doing that. And again, we're probably the wrong audience for it. But there doesn't seem to be much audience left for whatever's left. It was terrible.
Yeah.
That was a terrible moment. I wouldn't have done that. That was demeaning to her as She-Hulk. I mean, I would have, I would have let Megan Thee Stallion do it, and then She-Hulk go, nah, you know what? Not today.
I'm
Megan.
not wearing the pants.
I'm not wearing the right pants for that.
Exactly. The other part too is, isn't this? She's supposed to be technically motion captured off of. Tatiana is supposed to be actually there in a motion suit with a big stick on her head.
Correct.
Her eye line. So why are the proportions always out of whack?
Well, the part of it too is if you take a look at, I'm going to get into if you look at the old Bethesda games, the arms are always looking a little bit too long and the hands are always looking a little bit too big.
Yeah.
That's a fault of the 3D skeleton, the way they've set that up. I see it all the time.
Layered incorrectly, right?
It's been constructed. Her animated body has initially been constructed correctly, because then that is handed off to what we call a puppeteer. Mm-hmm. So the person who creates the motion and is not the programmer of the skeleton and putting together the model of that. Now her face is fairly well done. And then they're kind of compositing her into.
Paul, wouldn't that be an animator's job though after that then to clean it up and make it look proper? Because isn't that kind of the
it would then go
process?
Back to the technical people to do it. The puppeteers do the motion and
and then when it gets cleaned up afterwards, if something doesn't look quite right or whatever.
But you know what? For me, it's actually the least of my problems if the rest of the show was handled.
No, I agree totally. She could be a fucking puppet for all I care. If the show was good. The problem I have is all the things we've talked about here, and beyond that, like the Blonsky character, that's not Blonsky anymore. We don't even see any kind of like spark of what he used to be, really, outside of, oh yeah, by the way, I escaped, but it wasn't my fault. It felt so off in a way that I can't explain other than it just.
Oh no, I gotta wait for Wong to come back in time to tell him the story.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta do filler. I have to do filler, literally filler in a show.
It was just the most weirdest thing, considering in the last episode he was one of the highlights, right? So in this episode he was just kind of meh, and his character was just kind of blah.
And then, it's what I talked about in my sitcom thing. What's the dilemma vector? Like, how invested and were you concerned about the outcome of Blonsky with the parole board? Oh my God, I'm so tense. Like, there was none.
Nobody cares. That's the problem.
They actually hinted in the previous episode that the reason he's there is because he volunteered for a government-sanctioned program. So the government is responsible for him being the abomination and responsible for his crimes. He should have been trying to go after the government for wronging this, making this guy out to be a victim of the government's overreach with regards to Hulk. And that should have been, that's where you could get your whole abomination on the stand next to the judge,
I think
answering questions.
That's brilliant. That's exactly what it needs to be. And
really good script doctor. Oh, I get it now. I didn't get it up until this moment. You just spoke. Now I'm understanding the name.
Well, no, that's what a good lawyer would do, right? Because then that's a whole. And even if they try to counter with, well, yeah, but he was aggressive to begin with, it's like, yeah, that's the reason you picked him.
But
that's the reason he was picked in the first place.
You're dealing with the hidden, the QAnon state of this military organization that is not going to want to reveal what they actually did to Blonsky. Like, that's another layer.
That's a problem here too. Yeah.
Huge problem that should be exploited. Yes, script doctor, you're absolutely correct. That would have been a great.
That is why Blonsky shouldn't be the one who is being defended here. They did it simply because he's the one who fought Bruce. Let's be real. But you are right. You both are right. There's no way he'd be on trial. None. They would not want any of this shit out there. They wouldn't want to be talking about it. Blonsky was a fuck up by the government. The last thing they would be covering it up. The last thing they would do is making a public spectacle of it.
And it would have actually been more interesting if Blonsky, because he is a military person, would have refused to actually reveal this truth. And it would have been Jennifer digging up, or her assistant, Fran Drescher, digs up this fact that this is the connection, and he refuses to admit it. And then she has to work it through herself. See, tons of stuff that would appear on even CSI that's not here.
Right. Well, what's another issue that Marvel has is they have a villain problem. Here's a perfect opportunity for you to introduce some actual villains. And, that's kind of the problem these lawyers have sometimes. Is like, that's what I love about Liar Liars, that scene where that one guy keeps getting put in jail and he finally just goes and goes, "Quit breaking the law, asshole." It's like, I can imagine sooner or later, a lot of these lawyers, after dealing with a lot of these guys, that's their fucking reaction. And that's the kind of stuff you can play with, like you're talking about, Paul, is that she's got to deal with all these bad clients, right? Like literally bad clients.
So Script and I, just in the last few minutes, solved this show.
Yeah,
you actually did, to a very large extent.
And the beauty of it is they don't have to be innocent. That's where she doesn't have to be such a great lawyer.
That's exactly right.
Well, I mean, she still has to be the best lawyer she can, because if she were to nag on her ability to defend her client, she would lose her.
But a lot of times, it could be where she would accidentally get herself into the point where if the person was actually guilty of something, then it would find a way to where, a technicality would come off and she would be able to not be blamed for it. But whatever.
And then they had that scene where she finally got to be She-Hulk and beat up those guys who had those devices, and someone was trying to get
the wrecking crew. Yeah.
So that's going to happen later. We know that that's now a thing. On the other hand, it would have been very funny to have Blonsky as Abomination and her as She-Hulk kind of facing off somehow. And
I would have them facing off, not physically, but literally an argument. Just a shouting match where they just start to grow at each other, and you think they're going to fight, but they never do.
That would have been
homonyms at each other.
See, that's what I would have wanted to see.
Yeah, that's what. See, the other part I would have wanted to see. And okay, are you familiar, Paul, with the Damon Wayans movie Little Man?
No.
Okay, so what they did is they hired a dwarf, and then they CGI'd Marlon Wayans' face on top of him in order to make it look like. They should have done the inverse of that for She-Hulk. They should have got a tall 6'7" bodybuilder woman and just painted out her face and put in Tatiana Maslany's face. And what they would have done is, the pair syncing where the actor is like 4 feet to the left or right off camera doing her scene, and then she's got her own camera focused on her face, and then they just crop that in there in post. So much cheaper. You don't have to worry about too much CGI rigging. They should have done
the Ferrigno gambit, but with
pretty
face
much
swapping.
Yeah, with just the face swapping, because that way you get the performance out of it as well. And a good bodybuilder knows how to mimic body language and movement because they focus so much on their muscles. So whatever Tatiana's doing on to her right or left, she can just mimic that as well if she wants to get all the gestures.
And then it's actually easier to even make that bodybuilder a bit bigger. Like
yes.
You don't have to keep them the Lou Ferrigno side. It's now common to.
And you only have to paint their hands and the neckline green, and then that's it, and you're good. Put a wig on her, and she's no CGI hair,
problems.
nothing.
Next show, we should have solving shows.
Fixing it.
Fixing it. Welcome
fixing it in way after post.
we